Again, it's always a delight to hear you, Alan.
Oh, thanks, Rex. You're very kind. It's a fun topic. I'm trying to get, Dave would know this, but Liz, I'm trying to get the relationship education profession to pay attention to this issue, and it's not easy. They want to work with the relationships that are already there. That's their, bread and butter.
Of course, of course. Yeah.
Um,
Well, we're going to
and
be in trouble if we don't pay attention.
that's my point. Yeah. And so, thank you again for your willingness to pay attention to this, and hopefully we can maybe nudge the culture a little bit with a few things like this.
Is this epidemic in dating? I'm I'm hitting two things here. It's interesting to me that we're going through this now, especially after there was a very sexually promiscuous and permissive culture decades ago. Is there a reason, like, it's just weird that there's this huge shift from this crazy engagement to like an engagement recession? Is there any links or correlations there?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's trying to correlate kind of two things. We've had this, in some sense, this hypersexual society that young people are being raised in. And it is actually very interesting is that the youngest generations are actually sexually less active than their parents were. And they, if we were thinking that, I have to be somewhat honest. The biggest difference, we didn't see a lot of difference between young men and young women in the challenges that they were facing and their attitudes about dating. The biggest area where we did see a difference was on one of the purposes for dating. And for men, about half of it still is they want to enjoy sexual intimacy, dramatically less for young women on that item. But that, I think, the fact that we've kind of that sexuality is such an open and negotiated thing these days that it actually puts a lot more pressure on the dating thing. And having to clarify what everybody wants or is interested or not interested in. It also kind of hypercharges the dating environment. Being able to date in an environment where you don't have to worry about sex would go a long way in kind of, I think, reducing some of those fears that are there and opening it up to what we really need in dating is I'm interested in you. I wonder if we're really connecting. And gee, I think there's a stronger relationship out there for us. Taking care of all of those things first and letting the physical part, come along at the more appropriate developmental time when we know this person better, when we trust them, when we know there's a connection, and keep a little bit of mystery and spark there, I think actually, that sexual revolution has, in some important respects, harmed our ability to do, good, healthy dating.
Yeah, it seems like it's set some really bad standards, but the younger generation seems to have picked up on that and like, oh, I don't want to get tangled in that. But yeah, then that kind of messed up. Okay, so how do I properly engage?
Well, and I'm sure that some of this had a bad experience on my dating. They didn't give us all the details. I'll bet for some of them, it was an unpleasant, unwanted sexual experience, and they want to back. I'm just backing off, and I'm sure that plays a role in some of the bad experiences that we're talking about.
Yeah. Is this like dating recession too? Is it a global like issue or is it Is it geographical, cultural?
That's a good question, and I don't have the answers to that. Um, a fairly safe bet is that in advanced Western societies, they share a lot in common, and my suspicion is that many are going through a similar kind of thing. Our data were just a nationally representative sample from the United States.
I mean, I've seen a lot of talk about there's this decline in the birth rates. So I would think that might be linked globally.
The biggest factor in the decline in birth rates here in the United States and across most of the world, there's not much question about it. It's the decline of marriage. The reality is that most people still have got it figured out, is that if you're going to be a parent, you want a co-parent.
Yeah.
You want not just a co-parent, but a dedicated person who's going to be there through thick and thin for this incredibly difficult challenge that you're going to take on for the next 20 or 30 years or so of your life. And so they do that. You want to parent in the context of a strong married relationship. And when people are not marrying, they're not having children.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We've been talking about dating, and it had me wondering, did that start at a particular time? Was courtship different generations or centuries ago than it is now? Or
oh, sure. There's even books, and historians have done histories of dating. Relationships have been evolving in many different ways, but I just think there's something, it feels unique now about the dating system being broken. You go back generations, and the dating system was still kind of adult controlled, parent controlled, that sort of thing. And there were strong rules about dating, and maybe too strong. They didn't get it all right back then. But this kind of who needs a dating system anyway? Kind of period we're in right now. Who cares if it's a decrepit, broken down, vehicle? Who cares? That's not what people are focusing on. They're focusing on their education and on work and on their careers and that sort of thing. And then relationships will just come magically at some point. Well, that's nonsense. So if we overscripted the whole dating thing generations ago, we've incredibly underscripted it now, and it leaves the young adults floundering. And that's why I think we all have a stake in helping to rebuild this on-ramp to marriage that we call dating.
I mean, I guess I'm stereotyping, but it seems like relationships back in the day were really more, I'm talking like centuries back, were more of a duty than they were of an emotional connection, from what I can tell.
Well, there's a lot of things that have been written about that. Certainly, there were stronger cultural norms about things, and that emotions were not the only thing that mattered. But I think the best historical work finds that we're human beings, and they were human beings hundreds of years ago, and the emotions are still there, and the hormones are still there. So, and love was still there, but there were more guardrails on it, and more structures and more norms to guide these kinds of things. And we get some of them wrong. Yeah, some of them were wrong back then. But throwing them all out and just this kind of relational free-for-all. And okay, you're an adult now and you're in charge. Whatever you want, do whatever you want and figure it all out. Oh boy, that's, talk about placing a huge burden on kids and young adults these days. I don't think they appreciate that. maybe for a little while they do, and then they figure it out that they haven't got it figured out, and they want a little bit of help.
That's part of the journey, though, too, for me being married is realizing I'm not always right all the time. And I'm not always the best judge of this or that, or maybe I should listen. It's being in a relationship does take sacrifice and yielding.
Yeah, yielding, good. Humility,
for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. I guess I need to get back to my boxes.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.